Of course, Vice Mayor and City Council, it's a pleasure to be here in front of you tonight for this work session. With me tonight, I have Brandon Bordenkircher. He's the Vice President of Business Development for Innova EV, and he'll be giving us a presentation on a potential car share that could come to Laramie with the support of City Council to provide some micro-mobility and meet some of our environmental goals. This did come on the heels of the scooter project. When they presented the project to me, I was visited by Roman Karopis, and it seems like it's a neat project. I think it's something that would fit some of the needs of Laramie, and I think we're interested to hear Council's opinion on that. So without any further discussion, I'll turn it over to Brandon to make an introduction of himself, maybe a little bit better and more clear than I have done. But I think you'll enjoy this presentation tonight. Thank you.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you, Brandon.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction, Todd. So hello, everybody. I'm Brandon Bordenkircher, VP of Business Development at Innova EV. A little bit about me. My background is in tech policy. I spent 3 years on Airbnb's public policy team. I got bored of the housing space, and I broke into the mobility space. I wrote a few white papers on new disruptive mobility, like dockless bikes and e-scooters. And that caught the eye of the folks at Daimler, if you're familiar with Daimler, the parent company of Mercedes-Benz. And they tapped me to be their general manager of their car sharing app here in Chicago, Illinois, where I managed 400 vehicles, 200 smart cars and 200 Mercedes-Benz. So that is where I met the CEO of Innova EV, and I was lucky enough to join the team. So I'm not sure if you folks have the presentation I sent, if we can click through that. If not, I can just talk through it.
Brandon, our city clerk will run. Our city clerk will run the presentation for you.
Got you. Thank you so much. I can see it on the screen. Thanks. If you want to go to the next page. So shared mobility is obviously exploding as of late. Ride sharing, ride hailing, bike sharing, and e-scooters have grown from 2014 to 2019, and it continues to grow. And we have a solution that fits into that. If you want to go into the next page. So current solutions like ride hailing, bike sharing, and scooter sharing solve some of the issues that are lacking in our cities, but they still have some shortcomings. Ride sharing, they have surge pricing, so it's not consistent. In bike sharing and scooter sharing, there are issues with safety. There are also weather limitations and cargo limitations. So that is where Innova EV comes in, if you want to go to the next page. So our solution is a car sharing application that utilizes our dash vehicles. So our dash vehicles are priced more comparable to the bikes and scooters than they are to other car sharing. So they are affordable. They're safe in all weather. They're fully enclosed with AC and heat. They are zero emissions, and they are low speed. They go up to 25 miles an hour. So they are safer than other vehicles. And they're more versatile than dockless bikes and e-scooters. We have a trunk, and it's a two-seater as well. And it's also a revenue opportunity for local businesses. So what we do and why we're able to charge such affordable prices that are comparable to the e-scooters is that we do sponsorships and partnerships with other companies. And because of that, we are able to subsidize our rides. So we will wrap our vehicle with a sponsor like T-Mobile or Verizon. And due to that, we are able to charge $1 to unlock the vehicle, and about 29 cents per minute after that. And if you want to go to the next page, so how it works is we have dedicated parking areas. So unlike the scooters and that are just left everywhere willy-nilly, we have a corral-based model, which means we have 1 or 2 parking spots in one parking lot, 1 or 2 parking spots in another, et cetera, et cetera. So people can start their ride in parking spot A and end across town and take a different mode of transportation back. Or they can take a dash back as well. So it's good for short distances, and there's no car ownership costs. It's environmentally friendly, and there's no funding needed by the city. So if you go to the next page, you can see it's just like pretty much everything these days. It's an app-based model. You just download the app, scan your driver's license, your credit card, and take a picture yourself. It verifies that you are who you say you are, and you can find the nearest dash, take your ride, and then return it to any of the corrals. And that's it. So that is the gist of what we are looking to do there in Laramie. We are hoping to launch a pilot of 14 vehicles with 7 spots, 7 parking spots across the city in the year 2022 in the summer. So that's the gist of it. I'm happy to answer any questions you folks might have.
I see the mayor has joined us. Mayor Weaver, are you ready to call on folks, or you want me to do that? Okay, I'll just call on Councilor Harrington. I saw your hand first. Go ahead with a question.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Brandon, thank you for joining us. I think this is a pretty cool idea. I'm curious how do you all purchase the parking spaces around town, or is that a partnership with the city? How does the sort of docking station function? And then who are you all responsible for sort of that charging infrastructure that would be associated with the docking station?
Yes, great questions. So we pay for the parking spots. When I say at no cost to the city, I mean no cost. We pay for the spots that those can be revenue generators for you folks. So we don't want to take away from that. How it works with the charging infrastructure, if you folks have infrastructure already in some of your city lots, we can either utilize unused infrastructure, or what we can do and what we're in the process of doing is adding on to infrastructure you already have. So coming in with our own charger, installing it, so it doesn't cost the city anything. We pay for the parking spot as well as for the electricity. So that is how that works. We also, which I don't think this solution would be as applicable to you folks, we have a solar panel called the Beam charger, which is a platform with a solar panel on top, which you can place anywhere without any trenching or drilling. Obviously, in places like Wyoming and Chicago, that's not applicable all year round because we have winters, but that is another potential option. So those are the 2 ways we work on charging our vehicles.
Thanks, Brandon. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Somebody else raised their hand with a question. I thought I saw Councilor O'Doherty. Is that right?
It's Councilor Gabriel.
Okay, sorry. Councilor Gabriel, do you have a question?
You bet. Thanks, Vice Mayor. Brandon, thank you for your presentation. I was curious about insurance and those not familiar with the EV vehicle. How would they be brought up to speed on how to operate it?
Yes, those are great questions. So we have insurance through Aon, which I'd be happy to send you the details after this meeting. As far as education, that when it comes to technology, that is by far the biggest hurdle, as we've seen in cities all over the U.S. when the scooters and dockless bikes launched without asking folks. That was a big hurdle for them to get above. So we plan to jump over that hurdle by doing events to educate the public, as well as partnering with businesses in the city to help get the word out. So it could be a tabling event at the local chamber of commerce or some event that you folks have where there's going to be a large group of people, as well as demonstrations, reaching out to the press and explaining things and answering questions that way to ensure that people don't have any concerns or, make sure there isn't any opaqueness when it comes to what we are attempting to do.
Great. Thank you.
Great. I'm looking at to see if there are any other questions from council members.
Vice Mayor, this is Councilor Somerville. I have a question.
Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is, so you'll have designated parking spots. What happens when somebody doesn't return it to a designated parking spot? Do you have personnel in the area that deal with that, or how do you handle that?
Yes, great question. So 2 things. A ride cannot end until it is charged back into the charger. So we will know whether or not the ride has ended because we utilize geofenced areas. So we'll be able to tell if it's if the car is, where it should be, where the ride has ended. Folks will not be able to end their ride unless they park in that geofenced area, which means they'll still be charged. So that's a really big stick to make sure that people follow the rules. Number one, for any issues or concerns, we will have a team of 3 in the city, which is comprised of a general manager, which is a full-time person, and then 2 part-time folks who will be in charge of rebalancing the vehicles, much like dockless bikes and e-scooters are rebalanced. If there's too many over here, then they send someone out to, spread them out, so to speak.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Councilor Cumby, go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. Let's see, I do have a couple of questions. One is regarding the insurance. And would the insurance, it would cover both the driver and the liability should something happen?
Correct.
And would it, in many states, and I think in our state, the minimum coverage is $25,000. Having been in an accident a couple years ago, I can tell you that almost gets you out of the emergency room, but it doesn't get you, very much treatment. So do you have adequate insurance should there be something? I mean, do you know what your coverage, especially for medical coverage, should somebody be injured?
I do know that it is definitely above that amount. I do not know off the top of my head, but I will send all the insurance details this week for you folks to look over.
Thank you. I have a second question. Do you anticipate that you would be setting up like a central fleet station that you would have a location where maintenance is done, where there's an office, etc.
Yes, Counselor, we would. We would have, it would either be a storefront or possibly a place in a shared workspace, but it'd probably be most likely that we'd have some sort of place with a garage so we can bring our cars in whenever there are issues. When it gets cold out, I'm sure our employees will want a nice place with a roof and walls. So yes, we will have a place to bring the vehicles when they need to be worked on or when detailing needs to be done, etc.
Okay, I have a third question, and I'm assuming from the construction of the car as I see it, that these are front-wheel drive.
Oh, that is a great question. I will have to get back to you on that. Unfortunately, our CEO was not able to make the meeting tonight, but that is another question I will get back to you on.
It would be most useful in Laramie.
Yeah, I'm sure. I do know, I can say that we have operated these vehicles in Chicago's winters, as well as Madison's winters. And Madison has some fairly steep hills in that city downtown, and there haven't been any issues. That said, I will find that out for you.
Okay. It takes a lot to beat Chicago. Okay. And then as far as this parking, so I would assume some of the parking would be downtown, and it sounded like you were referencing that, like in public parking, etc. Would you also then negotiate with Walmart or with businesses, with Safeway, where the cars would be available northeast, southwest?
Absolutely. We plan to not only acquire parking from you folks, from the city, but also work with the private industry to find parking lots that are suitable all over the city. So whether that's Walmart or maybe even some smaller businesses that are in more dense areas, that's definitely something we are interested in doing. We want to make sure that people can get to where they're going, and if they can't park there, then that's going to be an issue for them. So we want to make sure that we, have all our bases covered. And that's something, we hope to work with you folks and the local Chamber of Commerce to help make those connections and find out where our vehicles would best serve the public.
Okay. And then thank you for your patience. My very last question is, you would be hiring a local person or bringing someone in who would help to coordinate and monitor snafus and pick up cars and things like that.
Correct. We would be hiring someone from the area.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your patience and answering.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So I'm looking to see if any other Counselor Schmeckel.
Actually, Counselor Schuster beat me to it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I missed that. Counselor Schuster.
Okay, got a couple of different ones. What is the voltage of the battery? I work on a lot of hybrids in our business, and I'm kind of curious what the battery voltage is. And it said short distances. I'm kind of wondering, during the middle of winter, batteries don't last as long as they do during summertime. So I want to know, you probably have to get back to us, at a 30-degree day, how many miles are the battery good for?
That's a great question. So I do know that our batteries, let's see, they can go up to 150 miles on one charge. Now, when it's 30-degree weather, I will have to double check on that, and I will check on the voltage as well.
Thank you.
Counselor Schuster, is that it?
Yeah, at this time, that's it. I have some other very technical questions, but I probably need to get in touch with someone else on this.
Okay, well,
Counselor, I'll make sure to send a follow-up email to all you folks answering all these specific questions that you had.
great, thank you. Counselor Schmeckel.
Thank you much, Madam Vice Mayor. I'm curious about the chargers and if they're able to charge other vehicles while your vehicles aren't there. Could somebody with a Tesla or a Chevy Volt or something like that come up and charge on that, and we could use this for some infrastructure for EV vehicles around the community, or are they specific to your vehicles?
You know, that is something we would consider once we launch and have things up and running. It's definitely something we would consider. You know, we see the community benefit of our car sharing platform as is, but you know, it would be great to encourage other folks who are already, you know, ahead of the game and have electric vehicles to give them access to the chargers. So that is definitely something we would consider, as long as we were able to install enough chargers that cover our vehicles to begin with.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. It looks like Mayor Weaver might be available.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. All right, I was going to say, do you all have trouble seeing when people raise their hand icon in the corner? It looks like it might be difficult for people. Thank you for all those questions, council members, and also for the presentation. I know that Councilmember O'Doherty's been waiting for a minute, so let's let her go. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for running the meeting.
On my screen, when somebody puts their hand up, it pops their picture up on the upper left. So I don't know if that tells you anything. I wanted to say, please don't discount the idea of putting the portable solar charging stations here, because we get like 330 days of sunshine here in Laramie. It's one of the wonderful things about living here. And if I were a student in the student apartments and I got a car to go to Safeway, as long as I'm still tied to that car, somebody can't then drive it away and now I have all my groceries, and right, I still have dibs on that car until I get the groceries back home.
Exactly. Until you park it and plug it in and charge it and end your ride, that is your vehicle. So no one else can enter the vehicle. So you don't have to worry about going out to the car and finding it not there with you know, two handfuls of groceries.
Yeah, I asked because I've given a lot of students rides when they bought too many things at Safeway and they're heading back with all these great bargains that they didn't count on carrying that far. Like, okay, so thank you. That answers my questions. It's a pretty cool system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. Councilmember Cumbie, I see that you've got your hand up, but I'd like to ask a question first, if you'll allow it.
Of course, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Cumbie. Brandon, you talked a little bit about how the app works. The person that's interested in using your program downloads the app on their phone. They have to upload their driver's license and some other documents. I'm a little bit curious how that works, so that I can't go ahead and do that and then get registered to use the app. And then Councilmember Harrington also has the app. And, you know, how do you prevent people from pretending they're somebody else so that they can drive the cars?
Gotcha. Great question. So our cars are equipped with 60 different sensors on the outside of the vehicle as well as the inside. So we are working on, sorry, let me start over. When people sign up for our app, they enter an agreement saying that they are consenting for us to check their face, take a picture of their face every time they get into our vehicle. So we have a camera that can take the picture there to make sure that the driver is who they say they are. We also have that same camera that can check the vehicle before a ride and after a ride to make sure people aren't, making a mess or, doing anything nefarious in the car, etc. As well as sensors to make sure that people are driving safely and abiding by all the driving rules. I hope I answered your question succinctly enough.
I think so. I think so, sir. I think what you shared with us is that the program uses the facial recognition technology that's used before anybody ever uses the car, which of course for me it then raises some questions about that. But I know that we've got other people waiting, so I'm going to go over to Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You could continue if you wanted.
All right, Brandon, would you like to talk a little bit about privacy protections and data encryption and how that sort of thing is then implemented to protect your customers?
The specifics on that, that would have to be our CEO who answers the more technical questions. Terribly sorry to pass it off on him, but I can get you those details and make sure he follows up with you folks.
I just think it's something that people would want to know about because, as you say, everything's app-based now, and then, of course, that means everything has a security concern about it. And
absolutely.
Just the world we're living in. So that'd be great to hear some more about that and get some more information about that.
We utilize, just so you know, which I'm sure in the follow-up, our CEO will delve into this some more. But we are utilizing a third-party vendor called Vulog, who creates these apps for companies like us. So they have a lot of experience when it comes to that, and I will make sure we get you those details.
Yep, I'd appreciate it. Like I said, I think it's all sort of par for the course with these types of programs of this nature these days, but it's always good to get all those questions answered when we can.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, that was it for me, Councilmember Cumby. Why don't you go ahead?
I was just, Councilor O'Doherty brought up something, and it just made me think that if a person if they are going to Safeway or Walmart and they're going to do their shopping, I can never get out inside of 20, 30 minutes. If they didn't want to hook up and that car potentially be gone when they come back out there, then they would have to continue to pay the service of the car, right? So if you're in there for 30 minutes, you're going to wind up paying another $9.
Correct. So what we will have, right? So we will have not just a pay per minute option, but we will also have the option to rent the vehicle for, let's say, 30 minutes and for a discounted rate, not 29 cents per minute. And then after that 30 minutes, then they would be charged 29 cents per minute. So we're still working out the pricing, and the pricing will differ from city to city. But you're right, that would start to add up, especially if you're walking around the grocery store and you can't find what you need, or maybe you're in line at the pharmacy and the line's longer than you want it to be, which is usually the case whenever I go. We'll have options to lessen the cost. And yeah.
Thank you.
You bet, Councilmember Cumby. And I saw hands popping up. I just wanted to make sure that anybody that hadn't had a chance yet ask a question before we go to the second set of questions from folks. I think everybody has. Vice Mayor, you had to, and thank you again for running the meeting. Did you get a chance to answer any questions, to ask any questions that you might have had?
No, I just want to say this sounds really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to reading some of the more detailed information. In terms of identification and privacy, it sounds very similar to me to the concerns that our students raised when taking a proctored test through an AI format. So I get those questions, and I think, we may have some customers, somewhat concerned about that issue. So I'd be really interested in reading that information. But that's it for me. Thanks.
No, thank you, Vice Mayor. I just wanted to give you a chance since you had to run the questions in the meeting a little bit earlier. I didn't want to have you be locked out. Yeah. Okay. And Brandon, you've heard some of those discussions, and your company is probably used to that. So we would be looking forward to that information. I think the people, your future user base, potential future user base here in Laramie will. Councilmember Harrington, Councilmember Schuster, you guys were really, really close. So I guess. Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Harrington, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Councilor Schuster. 2 questions. The first question is, Brandon, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about like the process behind selecting where vehicles will be available. And I would ask specifically, knowing that you don't know the geography of Laramie, but the ward that I represent has what used to be a more rural subdivision, but is now very much a part of the city, but is underserved by any sort of transport option, and really has no strong connectivity to the rest of town as far as like multimodal transportation is concerned. So I think this would be a really strong option for that part of the community, but it's also not like a really dense business area. And so I would imagine, much like e-scooters, you would be looking for like lots of foot traffic type areas. But I'm wondering if we can keep that neighborhood in mind as you all lay things out, and if that's something you typically do.
Absolutely. So when it comes to underserved areas and transit deserts, that's something we care about here at Innova EV. So we did a pilot on the south side of Chicago, where we offered subsidized rides to folks in the community of Brownsville, which is a transit desert in Chicago. So we offered subsidized rides for seniors to get them to the pharmacy, to the doctor's office, to the grocery store. So equity is very important to us, and that's something I would love to have more conversations about. We are looking to be collaborators with the city. You folks know the city a lot better than we do, obviously, and we will look to you to help us find not only the most dense areas that will see a lot of traffic, but also areas that are underserved that we could potentially help folks in those areas get around. So I look forward to having more conversations as to how we go about doing that.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Brandon. I look forward to those as well. And then the other question I had, Mr. Mayor, if I could, is I'm just curious what the initial commitment, I suppose, for lack of any other term, but what is the commitment the city would make to this program initially? I mean, are we just buying in and saying like, you're here? I mean, I know you have infrastructure and some costs that obviously you would hope to recover. So I'm sure it's not a 6-month trial period. So I'm curious what that term would be.
Yeah, so our pilots are 2-year pilots. During that time, so we would launch with 14 vehicles and start with 7 parking spots, which we would reassess after 6 months, after a year and a half. And if we're seeing a lot of usage in one area, we would add more parking spots to that area, et cetera, and up our fleet accordingly. But it's typically 2 years. Especially since we're, putting in hardware, getting our vehicles there. And also, when it comes down to it, this is not something that people just get right away. It takes a lot of education, a lot of learning for people to understand how they can use it. And we've seen this in all types of new mobility technologies. It takes folks a while to learn how they can use it, how they can best use it, and how to adopt it. So yeah, 2 years.
Great. I really appreciate it. Both points are well taken.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. I have a quick follow-up to that. Brendan, is Wyoming the potentially the most rural state that your company will be is attempting to operate in?
As of now, you are, but we are interested in not only launching in extremely dense cities. We understand that more rural areas, they need transportation too. They need electrical vehicles. You folks also have climate action plans and Vision Zero goals, and we think we can help hit some of those goals. So we're very interested in working with more rural areas and not just the city folks.
Sure. Thank you. Councilmember Schuster, thanks a lot for your patience and letting other people go. Go ahead, Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you very much. I know on certain rental car companies, you have to be of a certain age. So my biggest question is, are we going to open this to anyone who has a driver's license and a credit card, or is there an age limitation to it? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is no age limitation. What we do when folks sign up, they scan their driver's license and their credit card. We run a background check on their driving record. So as long as their driving record is a good driving record, then they are able to drive the vehicles. These vehicles are low speed, so it's a lot safer than someone taking out, I don't know if you folks have Zipcar there, or one of the, a faster or just a regular car rental company. These vehicles are slower and safer than regular vehicles, but we do a background check to anybody before they utilize the vehicle.
I saw the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, so yes, they are.
$25-mile-an-hour maximum speed?
Yes, actually, yeah, it can go up to 35, and they've been crash tested at 50 miles an hour.
I apologize, but of course I'm now thinking about Councilmember Harrington's previous concern, and there are some areas where a faster speed than 25 miles an hour would be required for people to get around. Probably, anyways. I know I have a couple of more hands up. I'm going to go to Councilmember Gabriel, and then I know that Assistant City Manager Fieser has been waiting for a few. Councilmember Gabriel, you're all right if I go over to Assistant City Manager Fieser? I think he might have been waiting for a few, and then I'll come back to you. All right, Assistant City Manager, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. I just wanted to pass along that when we first met with President and CEO Roman Karupis, that we discussed heavily the transportation mobility between West Laramie, West Side, and Laramie to make sure that as we looked at how we land the cars and spread the cars and balance the vehicles, that it's really a matter of how you hit the most dense residential areas that need that transportation to allow them that mobility to get to the places that they want to go. And both Brandon and Roman have been very open to those ideas and suggestions. And we'll actually be leaning on council members and other people in the community to try to help figure out, as Brandon indicated, that as we move through this, if it's working, how do we get them to where they get used more heavily from the right areas? And it's really a process, like you described, of, hey, it's not working so well here, so maybe we try it closer to this residential community or how we work it. But they've certainly been fun to visit with. I'm not sure if you guys have checked out their website, but they are working on a pilot launch with CSU. They've been at the Ohio State University for, I believe, a couple of years now, right, Brandon? And
correct.
they've really got a good match. I'm also trying to connect them with some of that private industry, because I think one of the most viable would be landing themselves close to the dorms at the university, which lends me to believe that that parking lot that's across the street from those halls would be a great place to have these vehicles that they come and go from, so that the college students, the incoming freshmen, and those folks in those dorms can use those. Now, I do know that the dorms move in the future, and we'll have to look at different locations. But they've been very receptive, very communicable, and seem like they're a good company to test a pilot with at this point. So I just wanted to pass that along at this point.
Sure. Thank you, Assistant City Manager. And I see we have some other hands popping up. I want to try to reiterate this point about, I think this, certainly from my perspective, this is an opportunity to maybe branch out to some underserved areas. I agree with everything the city manager or assistant city manager just said. However, those areas are already, as far as the city of Laramie goes, covered by a lot of transportation options. And I'm really keen to see how we might be able to reach out to some areas that aren't. But I do think that then has a host of new concerns. So if we're going to do something innovative, I'd like to see it have the biggest impact on the underserved portions. But that doesn't take away from anything you just heard from the assistant city manager. It's absolutely correct. I'd like to go to Councilmember Gabriel, who's been waiting, and then I'll go to Councilmember Schmeckel, who I think signified he'd like recognition after that. Go ahead, Councilmember Gabriel. Thanks for waiting.
You bet. Thanks, Mayor. Brandon, you talked earlier, I brought up the insurance question, and you said you'd provide additional information. I just got to thinking about, would a potential driver need to show proof of insurance, or is that all taken care of by your company?
So that is all included in the price to utilize our vehicles. So with our vehicles, what is included is the maintenance for the vehicle, the charging, the insurance, and the parking. So car ownership, I think, according to AAA, the average cost of car ownership is about $10,000 annually. So when utilizing our services, in conjunction with, the train or bus, et cetera, other options that are out there, carpooling, it's a lot cheaper than owning your own private vehicle. But yes, insurance is included in that price.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Good question. Councilmember Schmeckel, thanks for waiting.
Thank you, Mayor. To kind of build off of the mayor's comments about addressing underserved communities here, we have a significant international student population. Can you talk about what license requirements would look like for students that do not have an American driver's license, or is that a requirement of the vehicles? And I've got a couple other questions as well.
Yeah, so we abide by the state laws. So whatever the state law is in Wyoming, whether or not these students are able to drive vehicles, we would, go by that. If the state allows them to drive with their current license, then they would be allowed to drive our vehicles. If not, then obviously we'd have to find a workaround. But we look to the state to that.
Okay. And then you say your vehicles have a max speed of 25 miles per hour. Do you see issues in other communities where the speed limits are 30 miles an hour of causing congestion or unsafe conditions for the drivers, or developing a negative persona for constantly being the slowest vehicle on the road?
Gotcha. Yeah, that is a great question. So it's actually, 25 to 35 miles an hour. But that doesn't matter, because you could just say 45 miles if it's a 45-mile street. So that's understandable. What we do is we geofence where the vehicles can be used. So typically we would geofence an area that is, typically like 2 to 3 square miles. So you're only able to use the vehicle in that area. And we geofence out streets that, are higher than 35 miles an hour. In addition, if there are any highways or anything like that, When people sign up to utilize our service, that is something we reiterate every time they get into the car. Remember, this vehicle is specifically for roads such as yada, yada, yada. Do not get onto highways. And if they do get onto highways or anything like that, we can put in something to notify us, and we can communicate with the person who is driving. So that's obviously, worst case scenario. But when it comes down to it, education, making sure they know how to use it, where to use it, and what to do when they're done with it, so they don't just leave it anywhere and rack up a large charge. Or tickets.
You just alleviated my nightmare of somebody taking this down to the state line, hoping they can get to Fort Collins 70 miles away. Thank you for that. My last question is, have you already reached out to somebody at UW on this? And is there communication moving there, or are we the first?
I believe, I do believe that Roman spoke with the university, and they are going to hold off for now. So we were looking to just launch in the city at large and operate outside of the university. Once it's proven, and once people are, have adopted it and understand how to utilize our service, I think then the university would be open to allowing us on campus.
All right. Thank you much.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, one other question here regarding the speed limit, and I suspect you will have longer conversations with our city staff, assistant city manager, but one of the big highlights in our community of only 30,000 people is getting out to Walmart, and the most used access point to Walmart, I think, and council help me out here, might be 45 or 50 miles per hour on just a short stretch of that road to actually get to Walmart. As well as our the west side of town we need to get over a bridge, and that's also a state highway, and I think that also goes up to possibly 45.
Vice Mayor, I'm really glad you brought this up, because it was going to be my next line of question too. And Vice Mayor, I wonder if we might invite the city engineer to possibly weigh in on that, because he looks at a lot of our traffic things for us about that, because I think you're correct. I don't think there's a way into the rest of Laramie from West Laramie that does not exceed 35 miles an hour.
Right, and also, yeah,
seeing what he has to share.
Yeah,
go
absolutely.
ahead. Maybe you have.
No, that works perfect for me. I just think about getting, that section of town as well as out to Walmart, which I think would be a typical destination for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I was having those exact same questions myself, and I saw a lot of the other council members nodding along. Mr. Japp, thanks for being here. Do you have something you can tell us about whether or not we're right about the ins and outs? And also, frankly, I'd be interested to hear about any other thoughts on this program that you might have, traffic-wise.
All right, Your Honorable Mayor, members of council. The area out to Walmart is 45. I can't remember exactly what Snowy Range Road is. I think it's at least 40 or so. So we are getting above that 30 mile an hour limit on those roads, obviously in that area. As far as the rest of this program, I don't know a whole lot. I'd have to think on it a little bit more to provide some more information. I'm kind of hearing a lot of this for the first time, just like you. So don't really have much of an opinion on it at this point in time.
Okay. Vice Mayor, back to you. I just wanted to invite city engineer to kind of weigh in at an appropriate time. I didn't mean to cut you off, so you still have the floor.
No, that's fine. As long as it gets addressed somewhere along the line. It looks like Brandon might have a follow-up point to make too.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Yeah. Brandon, I just want to say, none of this rather involved questioning should be interpreted as a lack of enthusiasm for this program. It's just, this is the council doing what we have to do, right? So
Believe
go
me,
ahead.
I would much prefer this than people sleeping.
Sure.
So I appreciate it. So I wanted to mention that in some areas, for example, here in Illinois, in Itasca, Illinois, we ran a pilot that utilized Nissan Leafs, which I don't know if you folks are familiar with those electric vehicles, but if need be, we would be able to do the pilot utilizing those vehicles. Those do not have a maximum speed of 35 miles an hour. So that could be one workaround, or potentially a split fleet of some Dash and some Nissan Leafs. So that's something we'd definitely be open to. We've done before, but happy to have that conversation.
Brandon, I think you might need to look at that based on just some of the things you've heard here, and it sounds like you guys have some experience with that. I heard you mention a split fleet, which might be a good idea. And these are some things that we probably need to get out and get on the table now to be thinking about. And I see Councilmember Harrington's waiting, so go ahead, Councilmember Harrington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it is on this same topic. I would just I would just urge a little bit of like slow pacing on this conversation, only because we're talking about 14 vehicles or something. So the chance of those being the slowest vehicle on your trip to Walmart are pretty small in the whole scheme of things. And I think the safety downside of the faster vehicles just might be worth a bigger conversation than, are you driving slowly between West Laramie and the west side and Laramie, or for that last like half mile before Walmart. I would want more time to think about whether the safety of being able to go any sort of speed in this would outweigh that sort of slow traffic. So that's all, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add that consideration to the conversation as well.
Yes, sir, Councilmember Harrington. I think it's all part and parcel of the general conversation. Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you. Every place we have talked to with the 45-mile-an-hour speed zone has 4 lanes. So if they're in the right-hand lane, they would be completely safe and things like that. And this comes from a guy that has a bunch of antique scooters that about the top speed is 35 mile an hour. And I have been to all of those places and never had a problem, because most people look at it and go, that's really cool. So I don't see that would be a problem at all, because like I said, it's not like they're in a 2-lane street and they have it backed up a mile. Nope, there's always a passing lane if you're in that much of a hurry. So that doesn't bother me at all. I'm actually glad to see the slower speeds, because if you sit on some of these streets and watch the way some people drive on those streets, this is fine. This is fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster, and I appreciate those comments as well. A little bit earlier in the conversation, I was thinking maybe what we might need to do is potentially look at some signage for identifying lanes as electric vehicle commuter lanes, right? I think this is something probably that other communities have done to approach that, so that you don't have somebody road raging out or something, because there's the lane, there's the signage, behave accordingly. I don't know. I'm sure Mr. Japp might have some thoughts about that later on. Other questions on this interesting and engaging topic that we've got about an hour on, which is good, but what else do we have? No, we may have some public comment on this one. Okay. I'm not seeing any immediate further council comment or staff waiting to weigh in, but I see the city clerk trying to get my attention. City clerk?
Here, it
public
looks like
comment?
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you, city clerk. I really appreciate it, because it's easier for you to look at all the screen. Well, at least it's a little bit easier for you to look at all the screen. I see that we do have a public comment on this item, and I'd like to recognize Judy Snoke and invite Judy Snoke to come in and make share her views with us about this topic. Go right ahead. You've got the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I have some questions for Brandon, and basically one of them is, I also have a talking dog next to me. My Aussie, mini Aussie, wants to make sure she is well heard. Anyhow,
that's democracy.
Completely. The question has to do with what other areas, what other cities, small cities, communities do you serve, sir? Does your company serve?
Yes, that's a great question.
Judy, as you know, in public comment, we usually don't do a back and forth question.
Sorry.
But no, don't be sorry. And I don't mean to be in any way reprimanding you. Council, should we go ahead and allow for a little back and forth question on this time? All right, I'd like to do that as well. But and I know you know that, Judy, because you're a frequent guest of ours. We don't usually do that. I think it's appropriate, so let's go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah,
My
Brandon,
pleasure to answer your question. Sure. So, great question. We've launched pilots. We've operated on Ohio State University, University of Wisconsin, Colorado State, the University of Washington, University of Pittsburgh, South Side of Chicago, and the city of Itasca, Illinois. So those pilots in the past were through our car sharing, through our ride-hailing pilots that we did prior. We are launching our car-sharing pilots in about, right now I think we have about 13 or so universities/cities lined up to launch in 2022. So those include San Francisco, Miami, the University of Idaho, University of Illinois, Greenville, South Carolina, Arizona State University, to name a few. Okay. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. When I look on your website, would I also be able to find that information?
Sure, not with the cities that we are going to be launching in 2022, but the past cities, such as the universities I mentioned at the beginning. You should see those on our website.
All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Did you have any other questions? Judy, so you had a couple of questions, so I want to...
No, that pretty much is it.
I think your dog had one, though.
Yeah, she did, but...
Many Aussies always have the floor. All right. Let's see if we have any other public comment. And we'll extend that same courtesy to anybody that might have some questions for Brandon, too, since it's such a very... kind of interesting and far-reaching topic for folks. But, I don't see any other hands up for the time being. Oh, wait, yes, I do. Assistant City Manager Feeser, go right ahead.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, I think based off of tonight's feedback, I know we've got some things to work through, but it seems like Council's receptive to have an Innova EV do the pilot here in Laramie. What that'll give me the direction, what I'll take as direction tonight is direction to work towards an agreement and to try to iron out locations to hopefully get us launched for a pilot in 2022, unless I hear otherwise at this point. So that's kind of my goal, what my goal was tonight. I sure appreciate Brandon's time tonight. It's been fun to listen to the conversation and the discussion and see where it goes, and look forward to maybe providing another mobility service here in Laramie in the near future.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, Assistant City Manager Peter, and it's kind of a good segue maybe to wrapping up. I would like to reiterate that the questions you hear from the council members, Brandon, as I'm sure you understand, we're just trying to do our best to think about what other people might ask and what some of our constituents might ask. And, you know, sometimes we do a better job than others, but we try to be thorough. I feel comfortable with the general idea of moving forward with the pilot program, and I haven't heard a lot of comments otherwise. I think in general there's enthusiasm about this. It fits well within some of the policy goals that this council has adopted. Just some of those more specific concerns that we, as the assistant city manager said, we need to kind of just fine tune a little bit and get a better idea of how we're going to address those, I think. And I'm sure everyone is confident that the city staff and your company are capable of coming up with that for us. So I just look forward to hearing more about it. Yeah.
Looking forward to getting you folks that info.
You bet. And I want to thank you for your time here too. You've been a good guest, and we appreciate all the information you've shared with us here. I wonder, Council, are we ready to move on and say good evening to Brandon and move on to the next part of the session here? Okay. Well, thanks again.
Thanks, folks. Have a nice night.
You too. We just know, don't we, Council, that there will be questions, and so it's good to get a head start on them, that's all.
Mayor, when you were talking about signage for that car in slow lanes, I was thinking about the caution student driver sign.
Yeah. EV driver. Well, I think they have those things, though. They have that, those designated types of lanes for different type of traffic, as you all know. We don't really do that in Laramie, but there might be a few areas where it might be a good idea. I can see this program being really, really popular, but I can also see a need to maybe do a couple of things like that. Let's see. I think we've got that part of our work session taken care of, so we now need to get into, and that was really interesting, and I really appreciate everybody's questions. You guys helped me think about questions that I didn't even know I had. We've got a work session coming up now about revenue and rate review of water and wastewater, and we have got a number of folks from our staff. I know that we've got the Chief Operating Officer, Malia Brown, here, and I think she'll probably kick it off. So, Malia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I wanted to introduce Todd Cristiano from Reptilius, and he will be doing the presentation tonight. We have been working with him, staff. I want to thank the staff that has been working on it. We start out with a 10-year capital plan. We put in all our financials, capital, operating, debt, things like that. And so I appreciate Sean Klein and Jennifer working on that consumption information that you have to give to the rate consultant. We usually update the model. They do the tweaking of the model and really decide what our revenue requirement should be overall. Once you get the revenue requirement, then they go through and do the rate analysis. We don't really do that based on our financials. So I'm going to let Todd introduce himself and see his background, and if he wants to, he'll probably share the presentation with you on his screen.
Thanks, Malia.
Thank you.
Sorry?
No, I was just saying thanks to Malia. Go right ahead. You're good to go.
Excellent. Well, good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Todd Cristiano. It is a pleasure to be here, virtually, of course, and hopefully I'm sharing my screen. You can see part of the presentation here. That
Todd, that is not happening, but
let me try this.
Second, yeah, there you go.
Okay, I've done this a million times, but there's always something that happens in every presentation. So appreciate your patience on that. Tonight we are going to be talking about the water and wastewater utilities and the 10-year financial plan study that we have completed for them. And again, I'm with Raftellus, and let me back up a little bit. Other consultants at Raftellus have assisted the city in the past years with developing this financial plan, and we're just continuing that service again for this this engagement. And what we've done is developed a financial plan to ensure the utility's financial health. So with that, I'll dive in, and we'll get to a certain level of detail. We'll take some questions, and to the extent that I can't answer questions, I'll defer to staff and that sort of thing. But feel free to stop me as we go along here. And so the agenda here, I want to talk a little bit about our goals and objectives for the study. What were some of the assumptions that we used, and obviously the results of the water and wastewater financial plan, and talk about customer bill impacts and a typical bill survey. And so we'll go through all those things and hopefully show you how these changes in the financial plan will impact a customer's bill at the end of the day. So our study goals and objectives, obviously, we want to sustain each utility's financial health. We want to make sure that you have sufficient sources of funds, revenues, rate revenue coming in to meet your annual expenditures and fund the capital improvement program, which is obviously very important. Another critical point is maintaining your reserves through the study period. The reserves are simply what's the minimum balance you want to keep in your bank account in the event that there's an emergency or that you have to meet certain covenants according to certain loan documents and that sort of thing. We want to optimize our capital funding options, and that's just a really fancy way of saying what's the best way to fund our capital improvement program through rates, system development charges, and potential loans and or grants. There's obviously a best mix there, and how do we get there? By looking at different alternatives, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Obviously, we want to fund the operations. Your operations and maintenance expense are obviously very important to make sure that you can provide service 365 days a year at all hours. And finally, we want to do all this while minimizing the impact to the customer. Means we want to provide an optimal financial plan that meets the goals and the financial requirements of the utility, but also we want to minimize the impact to the customer. And so it's this delicate balancing act of juggling. We're balancing a number of items here to stay within certain bookends to get the best projected financial future for the utility as well as customers. So the financial planning process in general there's a number of inputs that go into it. Obviously, we have to do operations and maintenance expenses, and all your budget-related items go in. We project the revenues, the rate revenues, and the anticipated system development charges, what's your beginning balance, all those sorts of assumptions. And from that, we're able to develop a cash flow. But we have to kind of recognize some constraints that go into that. And that is the capital project funding approach, and that is, well, how are we going to mix rate revenues versus SDCs to help fund capital, but also meet the loan requirements? Whenever the city issues loans, there's always covenants and requirements that are needed to be maintained, such as maintaining a certain level of reserves or meeting a debt service coverage, which is very similar to a debt-to-income ratio when you're buying a house. So also we have other fiscal policies that we need to meet as well, and one of those is target reserves. How many days or how much funds do you need to maintain in the bank account at the end of each year? So we're kind of balancing here between those two ends, and from that we can look at a number of different alternatives or financial plan scenarios of, well, if we issue debt in this year, if we cash finance this project here, what would be the revenue adjustment? So we do that and try to balance that and find the optimal financial plan, and that's what we are presenting to you tonight, both in water and wastewater. One thing I want to point out is that we will be looking at some survey information, and that's always important to councils to look at. Well, how does our utility compare to other benchmark utilities? And it's obviously just one data point. There are a number of items that you would need to consider in order to get an equal comparison across the city of Laramie and Denver Water or anything like that. So I want to point out a couple of things that when looking at surveys and how the city of Laramie compares to others, there's more than just the bill that needs to be considered. One of those is your source of supply. Whether you have wells or reservoirs, whether you purchase water, what does your water rights portfolio look like? how do you manage your assets? How frequent is your main replacement program? Your service area and density. If you're a very dense utility, you probably have a fewer amount of mains per capita than you do if you're not a very dense. And obviously, if you're not very dense, you have fewer customers with a lot of mains. Water treatment costs. You might have different sources of water that require different levels of treatment. From a financial perspective, you have to look in the past. Well, how has the utility handled revenue adjustments in the past? If there's a utility that might have really low rates, that doesn't mean they're very well run. They may have put off years and years of rate increases only to have their level of service being degraded and need to play catch up with some significant jumps. They've also drawn down reserves, which kind of limits their ability to issue debt or even build up their reserves. So that's one other point to consider when you see really low rates. Credit ratings. Some utilities have better credit ratings than others, just like your own personal credit rating. A 200 credit rating is not so great as compared to an 800, and there are differences in interest rates when that happens. And another thing, like I had mentioned, is how capital projects are funded. Is it more through debt or is it more through cash? If you're debt financing a lot of projects, you might be able to get away with lower revenue adjustments because you're amortizing those costs over a period of time. Cash financing all of your projects means you need to build up the cash first and then spend the money. So you need to build up reserves and build up revenue increases as well to pay for those projects. So those are just a few of the still many considerations when we look at how Laramie compares to other utilities, just what their situation is from the operating standpoint, from the capital standpoint, obviously from the history of revenue adjustments standpoint. Well, and one more thing, many utilities, especially in Wyoming, do get special funding from taxes each year, so their actual rate revenues are don't fully represent recovering the cost. They're getting assistance from special purpose tax or property tax or something like that. So that obviously makes it difficult as well. Okay, let's move on to the water utility. Unless there's any questions on kind of the introduction I just gave, I'll pause for a second.
Mr. Cristiano, would that be the way you'd like to do this, is ask questions, make a time for questions after each section, or would you like us to hold questions till you're done? Probably with this one, I would suggest that you take questions after each section, but that's up to you.
That sounds great. If that's convenient for you, I am free with either one. So yeah, any questions on the section I just went through before I move on to water utility?
Council members, now's your chance.
You can ask questions about previous sections too. So,
and maybe some people will be more inclined to wait. It looks like we're okay for now. Thank you, sir. Go right ahead.
Great. So let's talk about the water cash flow assumptions, and there are a number of assumptions. I'll just hit on some of the high points here. When we develop this cash flow or this financial plan, I'll use those words interchangeably. When you look at the budget, you see expenditures and some revenues. You see one kind of fund or one bucket of revenues and expenditures. For the purpose of this study, we've divided the sources and uses into two different categories. So we've developed two we call them sub-funds. And one of them is an operating subfund, and that takes care of capturing the rate revenue, miscellaneous revenue, like turn-on, turn-offs, hydrant costs or hydrant revenue, and those sorts of things. And also captures annual operating expenses and payments on debt service, general fund transfers and things. So we've created an operating subfund that captures all those items. And we've created another subfund which captures capital. And capital obviously includes your annual capital program and also the sources that go with that, like loans and the system development charges you get each year. And what that allows us to do is find out whether your rate revenues are covering your normal expenses on an annual basis, and then to the extent we have other rate revenues available or reserves available that we can use to fund capital, allows us to see how much rate revenue is funding capital, how much is being funded by loans and grants, and what kind of rate revenue is maybe needed to help meet operating expenses if you're not even meeting those with your rate revenue. So it's a way for us to kind of track the money as we go through the forecasting period to make sure that we've set our revenue adjustments appropriately to cover your operating expenses and your capital expenditures as well. So that's how we've looked at it in this study, and that's how it's been done in studies past. So here's an update. Nominal customer growth, about 0.5% per year. That's what we've seen with looking at some historical data. And one of the important things is, I mentioned historical data, we do look at customer billing data, and we like to build up or project our revenues based on the individual customer billing data. That way we've got a more accurate representation of forecasting, or better ability to forecast, rather than just taking a budget number and forecasting that out at a 0.5% growth. We've included inflation in the O&M and capital projections. And some of our future sales are going to be adjusted down for lower irrigation demands. We have a few irrigation customers who are reducing their demands. And we have some additional debt service projected because we'll be acquiring some more water rights acquisition to secure some future water supply. So those are two things that are new and two things that are obviously impacting our financial plan and the revenue adjustments for the study period. And one thing to point out too is that it's been 4 years since the last revenue adjustment. That's 2018. We often tell clients that, you know, smooth and predictable, equal annual adjustments are always preferred because it's less of a shock to customers if you're doing a 2% per year or 3% kind of inflationary. But it has been 4 years since the last revenue adjustment. But with the revenue adjustments, we're showing here that we're able to catch up pretty quickly without any significant increases. So let's take a look at one of the main drivers here for any financial plan, or wastewater is the capital plan here. Now we've got this bar chart here. It's got 2022 through 2031, and what we're showing here is the dark green shows how much of the capital program annually is being funded by rates or reserves, and what's being funded by loans and grants. And there's been some specific projects identified for potential loans and grants. That's why you see it kind of higher in 1 year versus another year. And so we break this down a little bit. Over the 10-year period, $49.8 million is going to be funded through rates or reserves, carryover reserves from prior years. We have $15.8 million in state loans. Now, the state loans here have very low interest rates, and 20-year terms. I think you can go up to 30-year terms if needed. I believe all the terms you have here are 20-year. But the low interest rate, coupled with some grants associated with that, make state loans a really good deal. And the city is maximizing that. $3 million in grants. So the total is about $68.6 million in capital for the 10-year period, or about $6.8 million a year worth of capital. So this is a big driver in the financial plan. So we have a couple of projects we wanted to highlight. I'm not sure if Brooks is here tonight, but if there's questions about these projects, he might be able to fill us in. But you know, the 11th Street Priority Water Line, you know, it's a small project, $1.1 million, but you know, it's a water line replacement, which is extremely important. And we're seeing this being more and more of an issue as mains become older and older, moving to the west of the United States, and repair and replacement of mains is of critical importance. And you've probably heard about lead service lines too. That's also a big thing now with utilities, is looking for that. Another project here, the 15th Street Priority Water Line, $625,000. Again, just a lot of effort that goes into that, and the costs associated with it are ever increasing, as is everything as of recent with any sort of construction project. So let's take a look at a hypothetical situation here. We know this is not plausible really, but what we've got here is a chart that shows if there were no revenue adjustments, we went status quo, and we still had all these projects we needed to do. What would this look like? Well, we've got this blue line called our sources of funds. We'll call that our rate revenues and other miscellaneous revenues. And then we've got our O&M, capital, and debt service here that we would need to fund over the 10-year period. The blue line is obviously below the bars, which indicates that we're taking in less than what we need to expend each year. And so what that means is that over time, you draw down your reserves, putting yourself at risk. Your revenues, you wouldn't have sufficient revenues to at least meet your expenditures annually. You might have to defer capital, and as a result of deferring capital, maybe have some more main breaks and that sort of thing, decreasing the level of service. Realizing this is not a obviously an actual scenario that could happen, but it's hypothetical that some utilities do let this happen. And it does get to this point where it's just they've deferred so much capital they can't quite catch up. So here, this is our financial plan result. Again, we've got the same bars here, the O&M, the dark green, the light green, the capital, and the debt service, and our sources of funds. And you can see the sources of funds is kind of going up linearly here over the study period. And you can see that in the first couple of years that the bars are above the blue line. That's telling us that we are drawing down reserves in those years because our revenues aren't quite enough to meet our expenditures in that year. But once we hit 2026, with the way our revenue adjustments have been structured, we're finally meeting our revenues and meeting expenditures. And that's important because that way you set yourself up for being able to start building additional reserves for future cash funded projects, or setting yourself up for the next 10 years as you move into the next stage of repair and replacement and that sort of thing. So if you look at 2026 through 2021 or 2031, you can see that for the most part, the blue line is meeting the annual expenditures each year, meaning that you're taking in sufficient revenues and miscellaneous revenues to meet all of your expenditures on any given year, and that positions you well for starting the next 10 years. So let's take a look at what that means in terms of rate increases. So for 2022, we're proposing a 4% revenue adjustment. And then from 2023 to 2031, we're anticipating a 3.75% adjustment for the rest of the study period. And that will get us the picture you see here based on our assumptions of inflation and customer growth and all of that. So pretty smooth and predictable revenue adjustments here gets us where we need to be. One thing I will point out here is you'll notice the capital lines here are green and they're fairly consistent each year. And I just showed you a chart that showed our capital bouncing up and down each year. This is our operating sub-fund. So this is all the capital that essentially is being funded by rates and cash. We've basically taken off the capital funded by loans and system development charges and that sort of thing. They net themselves out. So here we're just looking at the cash funded portion that rates would have to recover, or rates would have to cover for each year. Okay, so let's take a look at what this means in terms of your rate structure. Now, your current rate structure, you have two components. The first component is the monthly service charge or customer charge. It's based on water meter size, and you can see here that the existing 3/4 inch, which is a majority of your customers, is $23.16 per month. Now, you get charged that regardless of whether you would use a drop of water or not. It's to cover meter replacement, customer billing, recover some debt service related costs, and that sort of thing. So the $23.16, and it increases as the meter size increases. And that recognizes that as you increase in meter size, that meters cost more, larger meters cost more, but also when we talk about capacity and readiness to serve, that these larger meters are using more capacity in the system and have larger capital requirements. So there's the existing rate structure. The proposed rate structure is $24.09 for the 3/4 inch, or a difference of 93 cents. And obviously that increases as you go down because of the larger meter sizes, but it is 4% across the board here. So that's the monthly service charge. Now, the volume charge is the second component to this, and we have two different types of volume charges or volume rates. One is our single family or residential, and that's a 4-tier rate structure, meaning that as you use more, you pay more. And you can see here we have 4 blocks that we're calling them. The first 3,000 gallons, you're charged $3.76. When you start using that 4,000 gallon or 5,000 gallon or the next 3,000 gallons, those gallons only are charged $4.69. And then the incremental amount above that, the next 18 are charged $5.88 per 1,000 gallons, so on and so forth. So as you use more, you pay more. And the rest of the customer classes here are on a uniform rate structure, meaning the rate is the same regardless of the amount of water you use in a given month. And again, for proposed 2002, we're increasing them 4%. So the block 1 single family goes from $3.76 to $3.91, or a difference of 15 cents per 1,000 gallons. Now, I'll point out here the average usage for a customer is around 6,000 gallons. So their bill is going to be charged at the $3.91 or the $4.88 range, depending on where they fall, if they're 2,000 or 4,000 gallons. Okay, I'm going to pause there. We went through just a lot of information. We can back up and look at a couple of slides. I see there's some hands raised.
Yeah, hold on just a second, Mr. Cristiano. I see we do have some hands raised. I'd like to see if I've got everybody. All right, I'm going to go to Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. So I appreciate the presentation specifically on this. And one of my main questions is, with the feds passing the IIJA Act 3 days ago, something along those lines, there's a significant amount of money that'll be pushed down to the states through the state revolving loan fund, which we've been very successful in the past. I think there's just under $12 billion specifically for the clean water and drinking water state revolving funds, in which 49% of those funds have to be given out as grants per application, and then the rest of them will continue under normal program rules. My question is, in terms of this rate increase, have you factored in additional money available through the infrastructure package? I'm assuming not, because it wasn't passed until a few days ago, but I'd like to hear your thoughts in terms of how we should consider that in the water rates.
Thank you for your question, and I'm glad you brought that up. We have not factored that in. We were just ahead of the game there before they issued that, and I'll tell you that our firm is working feverishly. We work with a lot of the EPA, and we're trying to figure out the exact requirements and how our clients can benefit from it. We're just learning now, so we were unable to factor any of that in with this, just based on the lack of specific information.
I appreciate that. In terms of that, if we make these water rate adjustments as recommended now, would you anticipate additional follow-up work on that to take advantage of those projects or that money that's available in terms of readjusting our plan over the next 10 years? Or would you encourage the city to consider additional water projects that maybe were pushed farther out?
Well, we always enjoy additional work with the city, that's for sure. It's something that probably should be reviewed, and we'd be more than happy to do that. But I'll ask Malaya if she has some thoughts on that, since we're turning over this financial plan to her, and she'll obviously be able to get some more insight once you get some more information from the feds.
Thank you, Mr. Cristiano. Yeah, I think that's the right direction for this. And Councilmember Somerville, I want to let you also direct those questions to Director Brown, as they seem appropriate for her to weigh in on. Why don't you go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that definitely I brought this up to Todd today because of we knew the package was coming, and so. What I don't think it's really going to affect 22 rates, because those projects are already in the works, right? So there's things that are happening, like I said, irrigation numbers are down and things like that. But I do feel that, especially in the rates for 24, 25, the future ones, maybe even some 23, we might be able to get some funding. But because the state it's probably not going to happen even in 23. I think 24 and beyond, our rates will go down. And that's how I feel. And so what my suggestion was, because I talked about this, was that if you adopt the 2-year rates, we can always go back and amend the rates down in 23. And so that way, if we could go look at the plan, and if things really, some of those big projects are bringing some stuff down, we could then amend them down in 23. But my idea is to go ahead and adopt the rates. That's what council wants to do for the 22-23 period. And then that way they're there. We could always go back and amend based on the funding we get or don't get, because there's a lot of things going on also, like, you don't know what the state is going to allow. You don't know what the conditions are and all that. I know that Brooks and I have put in a lot of, it has to be on the intended use plan. We put in a whole lot of money in the intended use plan in case this was coming up. So I think we would be, we water mains and sewer lines and things like that, generic, so we could use it.
Thank you, Director Brown. I appreciate that. And I think that was part of my thought. And I'm just thrilled to hear that you put some additional things in the intended use plan in terms of addressing maybe some additional projects in some different areas, whether they're aquifer related or Monolith Ranch. As I'm looking at just the bill summary, there's a lot of different categories. So I appreciate your work and your thoughts on that. Thank you, Mayor.
You bet, Councilmember Somerville. I'm going to go to the Vice Mayor. I do see the City Manager turned on the camera. It looks like she's just here in case we need her. All right, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This question is, if we could go back a few slides to the water consumptive use, the 4 different, I think there were 4 different rates.
This one here?
Yeah, blocks 1 through 4 for single family, and then of course the multi and commercial. Is there a way on our bill that we get every month to know what block we are on a per customer basis? I'm looking at my bill right now, and I'm not, I don't really know what block I'm in, so I don't really know how to explain this piece to a potential constituent who asks me. I do see usage number 3. Could I be block number 3 on my bill?
Director Brown, I think I saw you raising a hand to answer the Vice Mayor's question. Vice Mayor, are you ready for your answer, or did you have some more?
Yeah, no.
I don't believe it has it by block, but it has the total gallons used, so that you'd have to calculate it. And Sean is here, she can weigh in, but we don't have enough space on our bills. That's part of the problem.
Right.
To do this. And I don't know if Sean wants to weigh in, but that's what I...
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Sean, I don't know if you don't have to weigh in on that, but if you'd like to, here's an opportunity.
Thank you, Malia. Honestly, I don't know if we have the room on the bills, and I don't know the way that our rate system works, if it honestly recognizes what tier that is in. When we set up the rates, it knows to move through the tiers, but I don't know that it recognizes in the system the tiers as block 1, block 2, or block 3. But I can research that if we think it's important, but I don't know in this system if we can accomplish that.
I have a quick follow-up to that, Director Brown, if I could. Where could a ratepayer access that information that the Vice Mayor is asking about? If we can't provide it for people on the bill due to space limitations, which is understandable, what would be the next option for somebody?
I mean, we have the rate sheet, and you'd have to calculate it based on your usage. You'd have the total usage, and that's tough. Part of our problem is our software is so old, and I'm actually trying to move into new software. So it's just kind of antiquated. It's a 20-year-old software, and it's hard. It just gets the bill out, and that's one reason why we're going to do ERP software, because we need to give customers better information and provide them better service.
And that's something that we're working on right now, and I know you've been working on and
trying to get it to council on December 7th, but we'll see. I'm in contract negotiations.
So if I could jump in.
Yeah, please go ahead, Vice Mayor. Yeah.
So if I can jump in there. So my best response would be best case scenario regarding your consumptive use would be low end 15% increase, high end 35 for single family, and then provide, depending on, if they're multifamily or commercial, university, etc. We'd go from there to answer that question today, right?
Jane, I think that if people have a question about their bill, they call utility billing and they can help them. And that's what they do every day. They help them with their bill. So if they have a question about their consumption and how the bill is, the people in utility billing are answering those questions daily. And they provide good customer service. So that, that would be my thoughts. If, people have a question about their bill, call utility billing and they'll be happy to explain the bill to them.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem, Vice Mayor. Thank you very much. And Director Brown, I think some of this probably, some of these questions are questions that we can revisit when we talk about how you guys are going to upgrade the system, or we can talk a little bit about what opportunities that creates for the ratepayers. I think I heard you kind of touching on that, so that'll be good to have that follow this discussion. Councilmember Somerville, is your hand up from before, or did you have another question? If you do, go right ahead.
Mayor, I apologize. I just forgot to put it down. Thank you.
No, that's all right. That's why I was checking. Other questions here? And Mr. Cristiano, thank you for your patience. As you well understand, we need to dig into this stuff.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Okay. Oh, I've got Councilmember Harrington. Yeah, go right ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Decided last minute there to ask a question. I'm curious what percentage of this proposed increase would be because of the loss of irrigation customers.
I can partially answer that, and Director Brown might have some more information. The answer is it's difficult because there's a lot of moving parts in that. Some costs are going up, some costs are going down. We're drawing down reserves in those first couple of years. So we're trying to balance that with the revenue adjustments. So it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what percentage of the rate increase is due to the loss in irrigation demands. But my best guess might be a 0.5% or something like that. And it's like I said, it's kind of difficult to really pinpoint because there's just that many moving parts in there. All else being equal, but maybe 0.5%. Around that range, so not a considerable portion of it. That'd be my guess.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
You bet. Thanks, Councilmember Harrington. Other council members, last minute question on this topic? Well, if you have one, we'll visit it later. Mr. Cristiano, why don't you go ahead with the next portion?
Great, thank you. So now we're going to move on to wastewater. Two sub-funds, same procedure we went through. And this is quite important when we go through the details of it, because it really does give us a good snapshot of where the money is going. And so we applied the same approach here as we did in water. Very similar assumptions. There was a change. Some grant funding was anticipated to be available, but was not. So as a result, we've had to find other funding for it, which has kind of impacted what our revenue adjustments were. And again, just like on water, the last wastewater adjustments were 4 years ago in fiscal year 2018. So again, here's the wastewater capital improvement program. Not quite as many loan financed projects compared to cash, but still a good amount. $28.8 million to be funded by rates of reserve, 7.4 from state loans, about 600,000 from grants, and the total is about $36.8 million over about $3.7 million a year of capital. So very active capital improvement program. Another project highlight here, the Retinal Sanitary sewer replacement. This is a larger project, $5.5 million. And again, it's a main replacement, and there's many more of those in the capital program, and the city's staying ahead of that and being very proactive in those replacements. So I want to talk about this hypothetical situation. Again, if we did not do any sort of revenue adjustment over the study period, this is what it would look like. The same blue line is the revenue, and we have the O&M in dark, kind of that bluish gray, and the green for capital and the debt service and general fund transfers. You'll see that there's a drop down from 2022 to 2023. That's a one-time infusion of a lease item or something, but it was a one-time source, and then you can see it's flat after that. But again, quite a bit of needs over the study period, hence the need for some revenue adjustments. Come to the same situation here. In the first couple of years, we have revenue adjustments going. You can see the blue line steadily going up linearly. We have a couple of years where we're really drawing down reserves beginning in 2026, which is kind of the midpoint. That's what we aimed for, was we want to have our revenues meeting expenditures, and it does so through the rest of the study period. Again, sets you up for building up some reserves, because in those years where the bar is below the line, you're kind of building up reserves. In the years where the bar is above the line, you're drawing down reserves. So with the revenue adjustments we've proposed, keeps you in a good spot from as we go from 23 to 25, and then as we build up through 2031. And we're looking at annual revenue adjustments of 4% in order to meet this kind of meet this financial picture over the study period. So similar to water. And let's take a look at the what the rates would look like. Again, customer monthly service charge based on water meter size. There aren't meter sizes for wastewater per se, but many utilities like the city use water meter size to identify customers for the service charge, and it increases as the meter size goes up. We're going from $12.63 to $13.14, a difference of 51 cents, or about 4%. So on and so forth with the rest of the meters there. We have different volume rates here. So we have a bunch of different categories here, but they all have the same rates. So we look at restaurants, bars and taverns, entertainment and service. They all have existing rates of $4.60. Now, Director Brown, correct me if I'm wrong, but during the last study, there was a consolidation of these classes to get one rate from them. And you can see that they're all the same with the exception of the university hospital and the residential at the very bottom. Those are slightly less. And that just recognizes that these other customers have a little bit higher strength wastewater or more organic matter in the wastewater that needs to be treated, so their rate is a little bit higher. The proposed rate in 2022 is $4.78, or a difference of 4%. So 18 cents change here for all customers. And you'll notice here that we're going from $4.60 to $4.78. It's 18 cents. You come down to the 441 and 459, it's still 18 cents. It's rounding there. This is actually like 17.8 cents or something. So just due to rounding, why it looks the same there. So we've consolidated all these classes, basically commercial classes, and then this residential class at $4.41. So let's stop here, and I'll pause for a moment and entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. Councilmember O'Doherty.
Thank you. I'm a little confused about the revenue in the revenue bar chart, this one and the one before. One back one, I think.
This one.
Well, the business of how, actually it's probably the first one that you did for wastewater. Okay. How do we know, and this might be a question for Malia, we had revenue from grants like on a couple of those years, but not others. Is that grant money that we have now that we get to use in a couple of years, or is it we just need to get a grant that year? So I think it's back yet another picture when you showed.
Councilor O'Doherty, through you, Mayor. Basically, what we do is there's certain projects that we are going to go with SRF funding or try to get that we think qualify for the funding that we're doing, and we don't have the funding, but we put it in our capital plan to say we're going to go for this funding, and hence that's what we did with the wastewater treatment plant. We went and it was a $9.5 million project. We went for SRF loan grant, and we wanted 25% grant. And what happened with that project is they didn't have any more grant funds, so we had to do all loan. We did get a green, some of the green qualified at the plant, so we had 0% interest on the loan, but that affected this plan after the fact. You know, we really thought we would get it. We thought we'd have it. We applied for it. They didn't have, the funds ran out. So, you know, it does affect your reserves. It affects your financial plan. But most of the stuff that we go through, we do qualify for the loan. It's pretty, you know, reasonable. We're at least going to get a loan. But the grants are going down, and maybe they'll go back up with this infrastructure. But, you know, what we're seeing is we're not getting the grants that we used to, and we don't have the consensus funding we used to, and some of the things that we used to help offset the rates are just not there, and what they've been in the past.
But you kept grants for a couple of the years because you figured that
it might be
2 or 3 out of the 10.
Well, MRG, there might be WWC, which is a lot safer, you know, on the water side. You know, if you do grants there, they usually do give you that. So it just depends on what the grant is, MRG or things like that. We put it in, and you know, you're right. It's not a guarantee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, other questions here for this wastewater section? City manager?
My apologies, Mayor. I was going to say what Malia said, and I forgot to put my hand to remind the council.
No, no problem. No problem at all.
We eliminated through legislative action, and notably the Capital Consensus grant funding program through the state. That was a very significant grant source for us that has gone away.
Right. Thank you. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I want to clarify in case the public is listening. I believe that the wastewater rate is based on winter use, not midsummer. So when you calculate the wastewater based on the fresh water, isn't it based on the time of year that people typically aren't watering their lawns? Do I have that right?
Mayor, through.
Go ahead, Director Brown, and then Mr. Cristiano, go over to you.
Yeah. Councilor Doherty, Mayor, through you. Basically, it's the lowest quarter in the statute for residential only. So the commercial accounts are based on their consumption of water use, and so their rate is based on a usage flow, but only residential is the winter quarter low.
Thank you.
Mr. Cristiano, I think I saw you weighing in on that or about to.
No further comment on that. Director Brown took care of it.
I'd just like to give everybody the chance. Council members, other questions. All right, and I think we all appreciate that there is an element of uncertainty around those support dollars and grants and what the situation looks like with that, and some of it just remains to be seen. The city manager touched on that for us as well, and of course we monitor that, and the staff keeps a very close eye on it. Okay, I don't see any other hands for this section, so why don't we move forward?
Okay, I want to make one quick clarification. I probably didn't make this too abundantly clear here, but back on this slide here, we talk about the operating fund. Those graphs we're looking at are based on this operating fund. So we're just looking at the cash funded capital in there. So that's why this revenue line is so smooth, because it's rate revenues. It doesn't include grants and things like that. That's been kind of stripped off, and those projects associated with grants have been stripped off. So this is just kind of the operating fund look and rate revenue. So just as you're looking at this again, perhaps just want to provide that clarification quickly. Okay. So let's take a look at the rate comparison. As I mentioned before, there's a number of factors to consider when looking at rates from one utility to another, even if they're next door. So Raftellus, my firm, and the American Water Works Association every 2 years publishes a water and wastewater rate survey, and we've been doing this since 1988 or something. So every 2 years it comes out. And we ask about 250 utilities to participate, over 200, maybe 250 utilities to participate of all sizes, to provide information all about their financials, their treatment capacity, and all sorts of operating, that sort of thing. So what we wanted to do was, we wanted to show how does Laramie, the city of Laramie, compare to its peers of similar sizes. And the benefit we're looking at here is that we're looking at similar sizes that are across the United States, which gives us a great cross-section of utilities that are run very well, utilities that are catching up, and that sort of thing. So, 195 for the 2021. So there's three groups that are shown within this survey, and Group A are the really large utilities greater than 75 MGD. Group B is 20 to 75 MGD, and then there's Group C, which is less than 20 MGD, which is where the city of Laramie falls for water and sewer. And so we've compared the city of Laramie's typical bill to that of bills from other communities within this Group C. Now, it's important to point out that we can compare against the Cheyennes and the Caspers of the world and that sort of thing, but they're within Class B, which is the next larger size. And there's a lot of other things going on with a larger community in terms of density, number of customers, and things like that make it not as maybe comparable. So with that being said, let's take a look and see how the city of Laramie fares within that Class C group. And I'm going to highlight them here. So if we go to the first set of bars, this is 3,740 gallons or 500 cubic feet. And we looked at the min and max of our group. I think it's 117 surveyed, 117 in the Class C. What was the minimum? $6.50. What was the maximum? $84.85 for the use of 3,740 gallons. And that includes both a service charge and a volume charge or whatever charges they might have. And compared to the average, which is $30.78, and the city of Laramie is at $37.91, slightly above the average. Now we go over to 10 CCF. This is where it's a little different because we have a tiered structure and others might have a tiered structure. The lowest bill is $13 net light. Well, the highest bill in this category was $110.79. The average was $47.97. City of Laramie is a bit above that average. But when we look at the statistics over here for both the 500 cubic feet and the 1,000 cubic feet, that's what CCF means, by the way. They're 32nd out of 117, so lower on the scale, less than the 50th percentile. And of the 10 CCF, we're still below that threshold as well. So what this tells us is that when we look at a cross-section of utilities, 117 utilities, that Laramie falls somewhat in the middle here, in the average. And just gives us maybe a better idea of comparison than, say, just looking at communities next door that might be smaller or larger in a different category and that sort of thing. So again, one data point out of many that would need to be considered to really dig into what's behind the $37.91 or the $57.21, but it does give an idea from a nationwide perspective of how the city fares in comparison to its peers across the U.S. So let's dial it back a little bit just for customers by themselves here and say, well, based on an average of 6,000 gallons of water use, which is the average water use for a single-family residential customer, the current bill is $48.51, and that would go to $50.46, or a difference of $1.95 per month, or 4%. In future years, then the 2022 bill there would increase by 3.5% each year after that. So at the end of the day, the increase is $1.95 from 2021 to 2022 for average use of 6,000 gallons. So I had one other thought about that, and now I've lost my train of thought, so I'll just stop there. This concludes my presentation with the survey here, and I'll go ahead and pause before we come to a close.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Cristiano, were you going to try to give us a ballpark on the next years after that? Was that going to be your next thought?
I do not have that, but I can provide that to you. We wanted to stop with the 2022 and not overload with data, but we can certainly provide what the typical bills will be looking like in those future years.
Yeah, that just an added question. It's not necessary. Director Brown, I think I saw you with a hand.
I just wanted to say with the critical infrastructure bill, I don't know if I would go and try to say what the bills were, right. Only maybe 23 and, it's going to be another, right. Probably $1.90. It's going to be around the same or a little higher, but I think we have that in our ordinance if you guys are willing to go through with that. So we can talk about that on the ordinance reading, but basically in the out years, I really do think the infrastructure bill will have a positive impact on rates. And
and we've already.
Yeah, and I guess I would say for the counselors who have been here for, when we started this in 2010, we had to put in 30%, lots of really high rate increases, and Reptilis had 30, and we went down to, it was like 31 year, and then we went down to 10 to 6. I mean, we did not have the rates that we said we were going to do in the financial plan because we made some changes. We helped with SBT, and we really lowered our rates, and so to try to get that jump, and so we have it in the financial plan. It's a point in time. And so I would just focus more on the 22-23 period.
Thank you. Yeah, my question was just to make sure that we were capturing parts of the discussion. I think that's absolutely right. And staff folks, you have certainly touched on the fact that there are some factors that we're going to need to work into this as we move forward that are going to change some of these things, and we understand that. And I would also say this, as somebody, although not going back all the way to 2010, but certainly to 2013 and 2014, we were looking at some rate increases. The staff's focus and generally our consultants' focus isn't on the max that we can do in terms of rate paying for our infrastructure. It's the opposite, and certainly if we can hold things down, that's generally the goal. This is a revenue neutral project, right? We only want to be able to pay as we go and as we need, and so those are the rates that we're trying to capture here. So if we have infrastructure dollars, which I think I'm not sure what the timeline on that is. I think it goes out for several years. There's probably going to be several years worth of impact that those infrastructure dollars that'll be headed to the state of Wyoming and then the state of Laramie are going to have. That's going to go on for some time, and so we'll be looking at that each and every year, as you say, Director Brown, probably past 23 or maybe even starting at 23. That's going to have that impact. So we'll be having, the councils will be having those conversations, and all that information will be part of each and every one of those discussions. I think that's just worth saying. The goal here is to keep the rates down and sufficient for our needs. That's the goal always. Council, do we have any more discussion here? I anticipate that we do. Give you a minute to think about it. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, as remembering those rate increases from a long time ago, I really appreciate the work from our consultant and the ongoing work and the thought that's put into this plan. While I really want to make sure that the city goes after any dollars we can from the infrastructure package, I think it's important to make sure that our rates are sustainable. Those of us who have been in Laramie for a long time remember the years of breaking pipes all the time, and I think that's always worth reminding the public and talking about, going from a reactive water utility quite a bit of the time, just trying to patch breaks, to being proactive and making sure we have competent water infrastructure and just reminding the public, we are certainly in what I think is a much better position than some other cities across the United States that are struggling with severe problems with their water utilities, either in terms of lead pipes or underfundage or a variety of issues. And so I'm certainly interested in making sure we keep that fund sustainable and healthy. So thank you, Director Brown, and our consultants and all the staff work that's got into it.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Somerville. And that's a really necessary point to be made in each and every one of these discussions that touches on water and wastewater rates, is that over the past decade, there was a need to, and starting a little bit prior to that, there was a need for the city of Laramie to really do some catch up on a lot of deferred maintenance and expenses related to our water infrastructure that had been going on for several years prior. And over the last decade, the most recent, the city of Laramie was able to really get a lot of that done and get to a point where sustainable and incremental water rate structures could be looked at. I think that's accurate for the way the city approached the challenges. And we're now into a place that really does have more stability and is not such a patchwork process of just fixing breaks as they occur, but really looking at long-term planning and scheduling and taking care of those systems so that we're not in a place again where we're trying to play catch up from years of deferred maintenance. And it's just a necessary approach to infrastructure, and it's one that the city's taken now for some time. And I really want to add on to those comments from Councilmember Somerville and the importance of them, because it's completely accurate. It's completely accurate. Council members, some other questions at this time, or maybe we go to see if there's public comment if you don't have any. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think what we can say to our constituents if they ask us a question is basically we're talking about the first year, $1.44 increase per month on the base charge, and then a slight increase added onto that based on consumption. So I don't, and considering we're roughly a year behind in raising the rates, right? We haven't raised, in how many years haven't we raised the rates, Malia? 4-ish years.
Since fiscal year 2018 in January, so it's around approximately 4 years.
Yeah, so I think without touching the rates for that many years, 4 years, and that little bit of an increase on a monthly basis, I don't see as too significant, right? I mean, it's not much.
Vice Mayor, I think that speaks to that previous point about having put in some planning and made some choices over the last 10 years to kind of get us to a place where we could pace those increases, spread them out, and I agree with what you had to say there. Mr. Cristiano, I want to just kind of touch on something. You talked about those three categories that municipalities fit into on that the MGD, which I assume was million gallons per day.
Sorry, yes, 3 million gallons per day.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because the C category that the city of Laramie fits into is interesting to me because, of course, within that's a huge category. It's probably the broadest of those three categories because you're probably looking at municipalities that range from, somewhere around 40,000 people, between 35 and 40,000 people like the city of Laramie, all the way to, I don't know, communities that have 1,000 or less. And even within those brackets, I think there's probably a lot of difference. And so that's a really wide category there. And I know that as a city council member, the city of Laramie, it's always interesting. Small cities, we have our own little niche spot, right? We're not towns of 1,000 people or 2,000 or 3,000 people, but we're not here in Wyoming, we're certainly not, double our size like our other communities, Casper and Cheyenne, and we're certainly much smaller than the really big municipalities that exist in other places in the country. So we're sort of in our own little spot there. But I can also appreciate that it might be difficult to have so many categories that identified each and every size of a municipality. But it would be interesting to see how maybe small cities fit in there a little bit more directly. But I understand that might be really difficult. And one of the reasons it might be difficult is because I'm thinking about our neighbor to the south here. You have individual incorporated municipalities that are really part of a larger metropolitan area, and I don't know how that factors in with things like this, infrastructure and shared uses and shared projects and things like that. I really don't know, but that is something that occurs to me, that it would be interesting to see how we match up against folks that are in our same position. You can make a comment about that if you'd like. I mean, that's certainly not really a question, it's just an observation I had. But if you'd like to share anything on that topic, I'll give you a chance.
I believe that the data is there. We could narrow that down and see what that looks like. Try to dial it in a little closer to when we look at a demand perspective, look at the communities that are closer to the city of Laramie, rather than
if that's possible. If that's possible, I think that's good, because I think constituents in cities like Laramie can learn from that information. Certainly the council can learn from that information. It helps us, and it helps us, it just helps us communicate, and it also helps us tackle misperceptions that occasionally we hear about our utility structures and things like that. It's good to have that information. So if that's something you can get for us, that would be useful.
I will look into it. I'm fairly certain we can do that. I will look into it.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Council members, if you don't have anything else, I'll see if we have a public comment. Okay. Members of the public, attendees, like to ask or add comment on this topic. Certainly not the last discussion. Okay. All right. Council members, one more time. Well, we really appreciate the presentation and all the information. Oh, Vice Mayor. Yeah.
No, I was just going to thank them for all their hard work, staff and our consultant group. This is great information, so thanks.
Thank you.
A big and important topic that generates discussion and questions and concerns, and I think we've seen a lot and learned a lot of good information tonight about going forward, and there'll be more to it, as I said. So, yeah, our thanks. Certainly. Yes, go ahead, Director.
So I'm going to bring the ordinances on the 16th, just to let you know, based on this work session for water and wastewater. And I did ask Todd to attend those readings too, just in case the public had questions, he could answer them. So we'll be ready to bring those forth then. Thank you all tonight.
Yes, thank you very much.
And our thanks to you and Mr. Cristiano. Thank you for your willingness to attend some future meetings about that. That might be, that if it's possible, that might be when it would be really useful to have some of that comparator information that you and I just talked about.
Absolutely.
I think those thank yous go all the way around the council table here, and for our staff and for our outside consultants, and we just really thank you. And I'm going to take a risk here at a last name and say, Miss, is it Pansky?
Close.
Is that pretty close?
Shapansky.
Shapansky. Yep. All right. Thank you for being here as well.
Thank you for having me.
The work that you've done for the city of Laramie on this project, and you're sitting here through the meeting with us. We appreciate it. And for putting up with no doubt the third or fourth total butchering of your last name just this week.
No worries.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Council, I think we'll move on. That was a hefty work session topic, and I appreciate everybody's questions. And we'll have more discussion about it. I feel pretty confident in where we're headed and what our basis for going the direction we're going is. And from what I heard from all of you, it seems like largely that's where we're all at. We're not looking at $10 and $20 rate increases dropped all of a sudden on our constituents here, which I know is something we can all appreciate. We've gone to public comment. Do we need to, City Clerk? I think we have a public comment period on non-work session related topics. Is that correct?
Mayor, you used to, but at the last revision of your rules and procedure, you had removed that and added the individual public comment periods.
Thank you, City Clerk, and I appreciate your patience. I'm still trying to get used to that format as well. So,
no problem, Mayor.
Council members, thank you also. Okay, well, that takes us into our favorite part of the work session, which is updates and comments. And I'll just look for whoever wants to start us off. Okay, Councilmember O'Doherty, thank you.
I was looking through the National League of City meeting agenda, so I've been signing up for things, but I'd like to know if other councilors are going so that we can divide and conquer some of these sessions. Is anybody else going, Brian? All right, so I'll talk to you about what you can attend. Thank you. I don't think I have any other updates.
Thank you very much, Councilmember O'Doherty. Good topic. Councilmember Smeckel, I saw you nodding along or expressing interest in possibly. Yeah, okay, that'd be good.
Yep.
All right. Other updates and comments. Councilmember Gabriel, do you have anything for us this time?
Well, I think we should comment on last weekend, if we might. The border war.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
That was exciting to see the Cowboys beat Colorado State, get the boot back, and also congratulations to LHS volleyball, swimming and diving, 5th straight swimming and diving championship, 2nd straight volleyball championship. Quite a weekend sports-wise in Laramie. Congratulations.
Can I add the bicycling club from the high school also won some regional awards?
Good.
Yeah, all of those topics I think are worth commenting on. Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Yeah, that was I think there was some nervous anticipation about the border war. It worked out the right way for us, so we're glad. Hopefully that's the start of some more of a winning streak for the Pokes. We're looking football. We hope so. Okay. I think probably this is that timing where we're going to have more updates about our boards and commissions at the next work session. So there may not be as much this time. Would you like to go to agenda review, Council? Go ahead and get started with anything you have on that. While you're doing that, I could give a quick WHAM Region 1 update if you'd like, council members. We had a Region 1 meeting, covered a couple of topics. We had a preview of the legislative session with the WHAM staff members coming up. There's a couple of things they're keeping an eye on. As you might imagine, one of those is the budget recommendation for municipalities and whether or not the recent changes in the revenue picture might factor into that, and if there's an opportunity maybe for city governments from across the state of Wyoming to communicate about the continued need for appropriations our direction, and whether or not that might change from the $105 million. Our understanding is the governor's position hasn't changed on that at this time, but there may be some room for discussion, to reach out to your legislative members. I think we as a city council are pretty confident where our legislators are at and their understanding of our local needs. But if you feel like it, maybe reach out to folks and have that discussion with them. I know they're busy with the redistricting process. That was another topic of discussion that we touched on. It was interesting. I shared the view from our legislators, which I think we heard, which is that there's a focus on trying to keep things whole for the county and have the seats fit within the borders of Albany County as near as possible. One thing that was shared from our Region 1 members from some of the smaller communities is they appreciate that and identify with that wish. They have some challenges in doing that in Platte and Goshen County, given the size of their municipalities. But they offered a view that although it might need to extend beyond county borders, there's a way for the legislative districts to be drawn where they're really hewing towards those communities of interest as much as possible. And they had some views about that made sense to me in terms of what they call, I think it was referenced as the Platte Valley Corridor or something along those lines. And you can kind of picture the towns that might be included in that, how they'd like to try to keep that together in one district as much as possible. And I think there's probably an effort to do that. I don't know what ultimately will pan out, but I hope that does work for them and it makes sense. It's along the same lines, right? You want those communities that are looking and concerned about the same issues to be able to have one or two legislators to communicate those about and not having to share perhaps as many constituent concerns as some of the districts currently do. So we'll see how it pans out. Those are the two major topics of discussion. Councilmember O'Doherty was there. Am I forgetting anything that the council might like to hear about?
I think you got the main points.
And they're looking forward to the summer WHAM meeting that I think will be hosted in Laramie. And Mr. Schilling from WHAM shared that they'd had an opportunity to come and do some planning work with our city staff and the city clerk. And I think we're looking at a good event that is long anticipated and that we'll be able to put something together, hopefully, for the summer. Yeah, Councilor Doherty, please.
They did rave about our staff that they're working with, saying that you all were great. And would you remind us the dates?
Yeah, City Clerk, I think that question's for you, because I think it's in June, and that's all I know.
Yeah, Mayor, I believe those dates are June 8th through the 10th of 2022.
All right. Well, we really hope that finally is able to go forward, and I think we have every reason to believe it will, and the WHAM folks are looking forward to it. I did share with the other Region 1 members that we appreciated their patience, and of course they all said, yeah, sure, of course, we don't want to have a WHAM meeting that isn't going to be everything we want it to be, and everyone feels safe attending and all those things. So they understand, and everybody's looking forward to it. So I think those are the biggies from the WHAM. And I don't know. I hope you all wanted to know about that. And if you didn't, I'm sorry. But that's our participation in that group is important, and they're trying to do everything they can for us. That staff that they have right now, I will share with you folks, I think is really trying to do everything they can to advocate for municipalities of every size for us at the legislature and plan some good events. Which does bring up another topic. There was some discussion about trying to really make those training and education opportunities meaningful, and take a look at some ways they've discussed updating those and working on those to sort of add some new elements to that and really make them valuable. Those council members that we're talking about going to the League of Cities, those are important meetings too. And I think there's a real effort on the part of the staff there to make some new programming that's going to be really of interest to our Wyoming cities and towns, and we look forward to seeing some more and seeing what they come up with out of that. So that's it for the WHAM update. Other comments or updates? questions about the agenda, consent, or the regular agenda items? We kind of got a little bit of a preview about some of that this evening, so. All right. Well, how would you all feel about closing the work session and going on with your evening? Good? All right, let's do that. We'll go ahead and close this work session. Thanks everybody for being here, and folks, good rest of your night.
Take care.